All right, welcome back to another episode of Birds on the Farm. I'm your host, Kareem Hawk. No Sandy or Josh here today, but it's my first time as a solo host on the show, and pleased to be joined by Azad Earl. Azad is an MLB Draft analyst. You can find him over on X at data_prospects. He's one of my favorite followers over there, and he also writes articles on the Medium. So Azad, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate you having me.
All right, so let's jump right into it. The Cardinals are selecting fifth overall this year. It's been 28 years since they've picked inside of the top five. The last time they picked in the top five, funny enough, it was also the fifth overall pick where they landed JD Drew, which I think that pick turned out to be, pretty exceptional.
Yeah.
So, how are you feeling about the top of this draft? Do you think that this is a good year to be picking, fifth overall? And uh, do you think the Cardinals are in the position to land a haul in this year's class?
Yeah, I think it's always a good year to be picking fifth overall. In the MLB draft structure, right? You can even if it's a quote unquote weaker class, you can spread the love kind of around the board. I think this year at the top of the draft, it's probably a little bit thinner, just in terms of top end talent than we've seen kind of in 23, 24. But I mean, there's the mid tier in this draft, which I think is kind of up there with recent classes. So kind of maybe not the top end fifth overall pick, but moving kind of the second, third, fourth overall picks could be really interesting.
Yeah, I think what stands out to me the most about just being a weaker class at the top, it's uh, the demographic that teams typically like to covet in the early first round. It's the college hitters, guys like JJ Weatherholt, Travis Bazana, Jack Caglione last year, and there was so many more after that. Guys like Braden Montgomery. Like it felt like last year there was a ton of college bats that were like true top of the first round talents. And this year, it feels like we don't really have that. You obviously have the Iva Arquettes of the world, and Merrick Houston is someone that plus defender at a premium shortstop position, but you don't have those crazy talented top of the first round hitters in the college class. So I think this is why some people think this might not be the strongest class in the world. Like the demographics that are stronger, I'd say, college pitchers might not be the craziest top end college pitchers, but a lot of, I would say, pick 10 to 15 kind of range, all things considered in terms of, in a strong draft class. I think that these are more, uh, you know, around that sort of range than the true top of the first round kind of, Chase Burns kind of pitchers, for example.
Right.
But at the same time, like there's a lot of exciting high school bats as well. Ethan Holliday, I'm sure we'll talk about on this episode. You're a little bit down on him. He's the consensus first overall player on most boards, but you have him at 11th, I believe. So we can talk about that. But I just wanted to start off by talking about some of the college pitchers. Cade Anderson, he had a monster performance in the College World Series, pitched a shutout in game one of the finals against Coastal Carolina. I wanted to hear your thoughts on some of these, top college pitchers, specifically the three lefties at top, and what prompted you to move Anderson to the top college spot. I know that previously you had Jamie Arnold as your top-ranked college pitcher, but in your recent update, you had Anderson moving up to that first spot and jumping an FV tier as well.
Yeah, I think Cade is really exciting for a number of reasons, right? You have a good body left-hander with a clean delivery. I think that should count for something on its own, right? And then obviously, the a curveball, feel for spin. The shape isn't great. He throws it a little bit soft, but I think there's kind of some clay there. I think you have to think of it, in terms of training age, right? He's a draft eligible soft, missed time with TJ. So there's kind of a little bit more, I think, wiggle room with him to, refine shapes. And then obviously, I'm really, really high on the changeup. It's kind of a parachute type of deal. Kind of close in separation about, in terms of the movement profile, about 10 miles per hour off the fastball. And then kind of a sweeper, a little bit of depth, 8 inches of sweep at 86. I think that's a pretty good shape right there. So kind of those two with the fastball, about 20 inches of carry. It backed up a little bit in terms of shape, kind of moving down the stretch. But, again, a good body. He'll probably throw it harder as he progresses. So I think that's kind of the draw mix wise. And then it's like 70 field pitch, right? He's gonna throw a lot of strikes. He's gonna be able to kind of move the ball around the strike zone. So that kind of gives him a little bit of a floor, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then kind of just jumping over a little bit to kind of why I was, move Jamie down a little bit. I'm a little bit concerned on you kind of once you hit the upper minors if throwing 60% sliders when your fastball hasn't exactly stayed off barrels the way that I might like it to. I'm just not sure how that'll play, if the results will back up. It's a hard thing to say, to be like, hey, we're comfortable having you throw, kind of a sweeper shape as your primary pitch, into right-handers. I think that's a valid concern.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about Arnold specifically. His fastball, as you mentioned, the results backed up a little bit this year.
Mhm.
Nothing from a shape standpoint really stood out to me as a difference from last year, but the results on the offering weren't up to par with what they were in his standout sophomore season. Do you think that there's legitimate concern in that? Do you think that once he gets over to pro ball, the fastball, it's still a pretty good shape, flat approach angle that should,
Mhm.
in theory, work well at the top of the zone? Do you have any concerns about the fastball long term, just due to some of the results, or is this just yeah, basically that? Do you think there are concerns, or is this more it's just one season of this sample? Arnold's fastball previously played well. It's got a good shape, and it's not too much of a concern.
Yeah, I think the shape in a vacuum isn't great, but I think kind of as you mentioned, the release, right? It's a wide release, low launch, left-hander, a lot of extension, kind of brings it up a little bit. It's actually or two shapes technically. There's a sinker, which I like more, just shape-wise, and then kind of the four-seamer, that plays at the top of the zone. I think you can kind of do a little bit with usage, locations to kind of help it kind of get back to the previous results level. But I do think, there is some concern there. Obviously, he wasn't throwing it much, kind of comparatively to past years this year. So that could be kind of a, sample size, depending on how you want to look at that.
Do you think there's the potential for him to add a cutter in pro ball? He's east west pitcher, supinator. I think that adding a cutter to bridge the fastball that has a ton of run, and the slider, as you talked about, more of a sweeper shape. Do you think that would help out the fastball a little bit? Get something closer in velo to the heater, and something off of
Yeah,
it
for
that's
sure.
closer to a gyro shape?
For sure. I think that's kind of low hanging fruit right there. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. He's flashed a cutter shape at times. I don't think he's thrown many of them, but that's definitely something that would be kind of a clean, easy add, kind of way to kind of bridge the gap there. Keep the sweeper kind of as the feature offering, if you will.
And lastly, I wanted to talk about Arnold's new kick change. Uh,
Mhm.
the results on the pitch are elite, but do
Right.
you think it's going to be viable in pro ball, just due to the fact that he doesn't command it awfully well? I think it's a sub 20% zone rate. The specs are absolutely ridiculous. It's almost like a curveball s shape. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy the amount of depth that he gets, but at the same time, is that pitch going to be viable with him just not having any sort of feel for it and locating it inside the strike zone?
Yeah, I don't think he needs to land it for strikes. I think he just needs to feel comfortable keeping it kind of in and around the strike zone, if that makes sense, right? It's kind of going to be a chase whiff pitch, not really a zone whiff pitch, if that makes sense. Just with the kind of profile, big movement. But I do think that's kind of the feel of the pitch kind of is a cause for concern at the very least. It's kind of one of those things you'll want to have answered, kind of moving into the draft, kind of feeling comfort with the pick.
Yeah, and jumping back into Cade Anderson for a second, he actually had platoon results, or he had better results against righties than lefties this year. do
Mhm.
you think there's any concern in that? Do you think that the breaking ball shape, I think it's more of a two-planer than a true, sweeper. Uh, and, I don't think his fastball performed quite as well against lefties either. Do you think there's anything to make there? Or is this someone that, as you mentioned, he's got the good clay. Once he gets over to pro ball, I think the shapes are going to be more platoon neutral, and he's going to be able to get
Mhm.
both righties and lefties out. Or I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the curveball is definitely a bit of a two-planer. I think it's about 16 and 11 at 79, and I think the sweepers -1 and 8 at about 85, 86. So two shapes. I think as I was saying, the curveball kind of needs work. But I think a lot of it kind of comes down to the fastball, and kind of just being able to kind of run it in a little bit, on I guess righties, more so than I think some other lefties I've scouted. He's kind of comfortable, pulling it in kind of glove side, which is something that I think kind of elevates that performance a little bit.
And lastly, we haven't talked about him yet, but Liam Doyle, I think he's got the best left-handed fastball in the class. I think you could argue Gage Wood might have the best overall fastball in the class, but he's right up there with the Gage Wood, I would say.
Definitely.
How would you compare him to an Arnold and Anderson? I know you have him in the 60 FV tier. You have
Hmm.
all three slated back to back to back in your rankings. So, I mean, three
Yep.
completely different profiles. Anderson, more of a pitchability arm that I think there's more stuff to dream on with his projection. Jamie Arnold, best breaking ball out of the group, I would say, and
Hmm.
best release characteristics as well. But Doyle has the best fastball out of that group, and I think the most promising swing and miss potential. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on Doyle, and what out of the three. Does he have the highest potential? Would you say, and how do they all stack up with against each other?
Yeah, I think Liam Doyle probably has the most immediate, I guess, impact potential for the big leagues, if that makes sense. I think he's a guy who could, foreseeably be in a big league pen like tomorrow and kind of fit in, right? Fastball, like you said, very loud, kind of, upper 90s, touch 100, a lot of carry, top shelf. It's really good. Whiff pitch. I think he threw about 60 to 70% fastball this year, which was, really kind of aggressive. And he had good results in the SEC, which is, I mean, shocking, right? And then kind of another thing with the fastball is there's some utility with the pitch, right? It plays essentially like a sinker to left-handed hitters, right? 0% fly ball rate, high ground ball rate, I think around 48 to 50%. So there's kind of some things I think you could do, kind of just changing locations a little bit, being able to go down in kind of to lefties, hammer that a little bit. So I think that's like something that could kind of keep the fastball usage elevated, um, and kind of give you some comfort with that. And then kind of the splitter shape. He didn't throw much of them, but they're really exciting. I think that's a good shape. Obviously he has, kind of that sweeper as well. Could throw maybe foreseeably kind of a north south kind of downer shape. But I think there's kind of a lot of different ways that he could go.
Do you think we're going to see less fastball usage in pro ball? It's worked to this point at the collegiate level, but as you mentioned, I think there is some promise with his secondary offerings, especially a splitter, which gets a crazy amount of depth, in comparison to the fastball, which is getting, up to 20 vert consistently. It's Do you think that we'll see the fastball usage come down a bit in pro ball? And what do you make of his secondary arsenal? Do you think the splitters projects as a plus pitch? Do you think the cutter is going to see more viability in pro ball, and the sweeper as well in those left-handed matchups? I would imagine.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the cutter's kind of a necessity, right? When you're kind of talking about two east-west shapes, kind of bridge that gap, kind of get in the middle, a little bit, and then kind of sticking on the the splitter. I think it's a really, really interesting shape. I think it is probably plus. But I mean, he didn't throw many of them, so it's really hard to, say for sure, right? But I mean, if you see it once, you can see it twice, right? Then the sweeper kind of above average. I think the results kind of lagged a little bit, if I'm remembering correctly, in terms of kind of the whiff numbers there. Um, but I mean, it's a lot of kind of interesting ways that you could go with the usage. I think you probably want to move the fastball down to closer to 55% usage. I mean, people say like throw your best pitch, right? And typically it's not going to be the fastball, but what do you do in the case that it is, right? But I think that's kind of something that'll kind of work itself out as he goes through kind of up through the minor leagues, single A. I don't know if maybe somebody would start him in double A, or how that'll work, but I think it'll kind of, figure itself out a little bit in terms of viability.
Do you have any concerns about Liam Doyle's ability to just to sustain velocity deep into starts? I know that,
Mhm.
especially at the start of the year, that seemed like a major concern for him. But do you think once he gets over to pro ball, less fastball usage, that's something that we'll just throw around and we won't see it as, potent of an issue as what it is right now? Or do you think there's major concern in, him not being able to sustain velocity deep into his starts and, potentially end up in a bullpen role due to that?
Yeah, I think extreme concern, not really. I think some concern for sure, right? He's not a huge guy. He's about, 6'1", 6'2", about 210. So not a giant guy for, somebody who's throwing that hard that regularly, right? Um, and then kind of I don't love some things about the delivery. I think, an easy thing to point to is its low extension, right? I think it's about 5'5" to 5'7". So that's, a little bit of a red flag for me, right? Kind of not really getting all the way, out there, on the fastball, I think is, something that you can point to as, another red flag. But I don't think extreme concern because, I mean, he's held up, for the full kind of length of the season through a ton of fastballs. That'll probably come back a little bit. I mean, you could probably also like, just tone him down a little bit. I think if he's sitting closer to 95, you're fine with that, right?
Yeah. So, lastly, talking about the college pitchers, how would these three stack up against the top college arms in recent years? A Chase Burns, Hagen Smith, Paul Skeens, Rhett Lauder. There's plenty of college pitchers who've gone at the top of the draft in recent years. How does this class, compare to some of those names?
Yeah, I think Paul and Chase would definitely be above, these three. I think that there's an argument to be made that maybe Hagen fits in somewhere with the, this pack. Um, for me personally, I'd probably have Hagen, fourth on this list. And then kind of after that, I'd slot in Rhett. I think the stuff with Rhett is good. I've had some concerns about the medical kind of going back a couple of years. But I think it's definitely kind of similar tier of players.
And what about Gage Wood? Do you think there's any chance that he could go inside the top five? Like, could he be in play with the Cardinals with their fifth overall pick, or we're looking at more of a mid to late first rounder? Because I mean, no hitter in the College World Series is that was fantastic, and he's got one of the most metrically appealing fastballs in the whole class.
Mhm.
Has dealt with some injury stuff. I think it was the shoulder. You can correct me if I'm
Yep,
wrong,
shoulder impingement.
but he has some of the loudest stuff in the whole class, and I think it matches up
Mhm.
with a Liam Doyle. So, just curious, wanted to hear your thoughts on him. Is he someone that you could see in play inside the top five, or is that a little bit too much?
I say never, but also I'd have a tough time believing it just because he hasn't really thrown. He threw like 28 innings this year. So that's like a little bit hard to kind of foresee. I think his range is probably around where Cade Horton went. So that would kind of be mid first, in that kind of 15 to 25 range. Um, Maybe a little bit higher if a team loves him, but I think top five is a little bit aggressive. But what I've said with Gage for a long time is, the fastball's loud. I really do like the curveball. There's I think if he can throw more of the changeup shape he flashed, which was kind of splitter-esque a little bit, along with kind of a sinker. I think he's probably a number 2 or number 3 starter. And I think there's kind of some dialing in you can do, just with kind of the usage, right? It was a very, very heavy fastball curveball. I think you kind of open that up a little bit, and there's some kind of grounds to assume he'll be a little bit kind of better over a longer sample.
All right, so we're gonna get into some of the prep players coming up, but just want to talk about our sponsor of the show, 314 Sports Cards, which is located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet. They're open from 10 to 6 from Monday through Friday, and 10 to 4 through Saturday through Sunday. And you can buy and sell and trade all sports cards and Pokemon cards. They have the newest selection of packs, boxes, and single cards of local players and stars from around the league. So be sure to check them out, 314 Sports Cards. And here's Underdog Sports.
The Deal on the Cards podcast is proud to be partnered with Underdog Sports, our favorite place to play fantasy games. You're now eligible to play in Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, and 37 other U.S. states. You got to check out Pick'em. It's so easy to play. You just pick 2 to 8 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they'll go higher or lower. You can win 20 times your money by going 5 for 5. If that sounds like fun, sign up with our promo code CARDS to claim your first free pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We can't wait to see your entries.
Okay, so let's talk about Seth Hernandez a little bit. Teams are typically hesitant to take prep pitchers at the top of the draft, but what do you think makes Seth Hernandez so special? And, why would you not hesitate to pick someone like a Seth Hernandez in the top 5?
Yeah, I think Seth is really special for a lot of reasons, right? It's a 6'5", 190 athletic kid, moves really well, great delivery, has feel for the strike zone. There's a loud fastball up to 100, with carry, low release, high extension, or low-ish release. I think it's about 5'6", and then about 6'8" extension. Change up, downer breaking ball. He's got the traits, right? For me, he's the best prep arm we've seen since Hunter Green, who's another SoCal guy. But I love Seth. I think he's a really great player.
Do you think there are any concerns about the fastball shape? I know that he's sitting mid 90s, getting up to the triple digits, but I've heard some skeptics of his, mention, the fastball shape isn't the best, and they're unsure how that's going to translate over to pro ball. But do you have any concerns in the fastball shape, or do you think when you're looking at a Seth Hernandez, he's an arm that, as you mentioned, the velocity's there. It's a good mover on the mound, 6'5". I think there's more to dream on in terms of him adding even more velocity, getting, 97, 98 potentially. Is the fastball shape something that doesn't concern you at all, or are there legitimate concerns in that, do you think?
Yeah, I think it was about average 95 and about 17 and 10 on the circuit this summer, I believe. And then, USA Baseball kind of backed up a little bit. I think it was at NHSI, his outing, I want to say about 15 and 17, which is, less than ideal, like you were saying. But I think it really comes down to a lot of times high schoolers, they just don't have good fastball shapes. It's a really, really common thing that you see. It's very, very rare to find a high school arm with a good fastball shape. A lot of times, you're looking at kids who don't necessarily have access to like an Edgertronic camera, or pitch design sessions, TrackMan data, for a lot of their outings. So there's kind of a lot that you can do just with, finger orientations, seam shifts, kind of everything like that, kind of just going down the player development rabbit hole to kind of dial in a fastball shape. I think he's done it before. I want to say I saw data from an outing where he was closer to about 19 and 6. So I think that's definitely attainable. I think it just comes down to kind of workshopping a little bit.
Do you think a Seth Hernandez would be in play at that 5 spot, or are you feeling the Cardinals are going to lean towards a high school shortstop or college pitcher? Because pretty much every mock draft I've seen has them going with either a high school shortstop, whether it be, Eli Willits, JoJo Parker, or, college pitchers. We talked about Jamie Arnold, Liam Doyle, and Cade Anderson. Seems unlikely he's going to get to 5, but I think if he was available at 5, I do think the Cardinals would consider him. It feels like he's just a perfect fit for that organization. So do you think Seth Hernandez would make sense at 5, or are there other destinations you would say are more likely in the top 10?
I'd say it definitely wouldn't surprise me, but I would say it's probably, less than probable, I would say. I think he's probably in that mix of players that they could be looking at 5, but I would definitely kind of agree with you kind of on the high school bats, college arms thread. I think Seth is probably has a market at 1-1, maybe at 1-3, and then kind of maybe moves down towards the, Blue Jays, Reds kind of area.
All right. So I think that's a perfect segue into talking about some of the high school bats at the top of the class. Ethan Holliday, consensus, top guy on most boards, but you have him ranked 11th on your board. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to hear, what's your overall concern level with the hit tool? And I know that he's dealt with some struggles in terms of velocity. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a whiff rate north of 50% against fastballs, 91 plus, which you obviously don't want to see that. Are there any prospects in recent years, prep prospects, who've had similar struggles with velocity and underwhelming performances in the circuit like Ethan did? And how did they end up faring in pro ball?
Yeah, I think Roman Anthony is one. He was kind of closer to that 30% whiff territory. He's turned out pretty good. I think he's starting to heat up in the bigs a little bit. And then kind of Elijah Green is another one. So it can go kind of two different ways. I think with Ethan, the kind of grounds for, some optimism is he was good when he was facing, the upper flight kind of circuit events, the USA baseball training camp, the area code, all of those kind of events. He was, he held his own. He was kind of performing, which is good, right? You want to perform when you're up against the best arms. But kind of on an overarching basis, granted, I mean, it's circuit data. It's a really small sample. He wasn't great. The spray was, less than ideal. There was kind of some variance kind of with his batted balls. But I mean, the EVs were strong, which is good. There's some pull side kind of ability, though not necessarily against velocity, but it's in there. So there's kind of a lot of different kind of conflicting, I guess, indicators, if that would make sense, just kind of in Ethan's data. I don't think he's necessarily a shortstop. I don't think that's crazy to say. Not a, elite runner, but he's a good athlete, good mover, good arm. I think he fits at third base. But again, for me, it's just like I'll be a lot more forgiving of hit tool concerns or kind of different things if you're a great athlete or if you're a shortstop center field kind of guy. Just didn't feel that way with Ethan, so I think I was a little bit harsher just in terms of how I viewed him.
Do you think there's any shot that he falls to 5? Or it seems like the floor with him is 4 to the Rockies.
Mhm.
It feels like that organization, especially with their ties. I know the Cardinals have ties with Matt Holliday as well, but the Rockies do as well. So I feel like the floor for him is that 4th overall selection. But do you think there's any chance that he could slip to 5?
I think the only way that would kind of be conceivable is maybe if, maybe say Cade went 1-1 and, Jamie was available at 4 and they were just in love with him, maybe. But I really don't think that would be the case. I think that if he was available at 4, he'd be the pick at 4.
How would you rank and group these following high school shortstops? So Ethan Holliday, we just talked about him. Eli Willits, he's been mocked to the Cardinals a ton. Billy Carlson, and then lastly, JoJo Parker.
Yeah, I definitely have it Billy, Eli, Ethan, and then JoJo. Kind of Billy's been my guy. I think the swing is definitely a little bit worse than I want to admit, right? It's a long load, kind of arm bar, can throw his timing a little bit, but the pitch tracking skills are kind of top end. The bat speed is really good. EVs are strong for a kid who's, about 175 pounds, right? Plays a brilliant shortstop. He's up there with Marek, kind of in in terms of being the best shortstop in the class. Great arm, up to 97 on the mound. Athletic testing data is off the charts. But it just comes down to that swing, right? I think, if all things were equal with the swing, he'd probably be my 1-1, but they're not. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. With Eli, I think it's a little bit more kind of along the Cole Young is what I've kind of seen it as lines. I think it's kind of IR dominant, hitter. So it's a little bit tougher to foresee him hitting for power really ever. I think 10, 12 pumps, a year would kind of be the ceiling there. In all likelihood, he's about a 6'7", 6'8" runner. So not off the charts, but not bad. Again, like young for the class. So like performance adjustments are really kind to him. He was, a year younger than most of the pitchers he faced last summer. So that's good. Contact rate solid, hits breaking balls, has the ability to kind of get around on velocity. So kind of a lot of good things. I think it's more of a higher floor, quote unquote, lower ceiling type of profile. Then kind of, touching briefly on Ethan, I think it's 70 grade power and probably closer to 40 grade hit. But I think that plays, obviously you have to, factor in the bloodlines a little bit. But I'm definitely not, in the camp that he's, somehow void of talent. I think he's a very, very talented baseball player, but I think he's kind of going to face a little bit of adversity, at least to start. And then kind of jumping over to JoJo, obviously some of the better contact rates on the circuit, is old for the class. So that kind of does factor in, kind of older than most of his peers. Not a great athlete, in terms of force production. Does have, kind of some physicality to him already. It's about 6'1", 205. So a little bit physically maxed, good bat to ball skills. Has present thump, but I don't foresee him having, much more than he has right now. I think the jump testing data isn't great, but he's about a 6'6" run, 6'6", 5", I think is the 60-yard dash time. So not a bad athlete. I think he's more of a second base profile, bat first, second base profile, about average power, high hit tool. So I think that's kind of, the profile there.
Yeah, so it seems like Billy Carlson out of that group, he's far and away the best defender, and there are no questions with him sticking at the position. But what about Eli Willits? Do you think that long-term he's going to stay at that shortstop position?
I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say I would assume he stays there, but I don't think that would be crazy to say. I think he's definitely a very capable shortstop. I just don't know how the arm kind of plays there long term.
But the other two you foresee moving off the position in
Yes.
Ethan Holliday and
Yes.
JoJo Parker. All right. So are there any other high school shortstops you think that should be included in this group? I know that you have Gavin Feen ranked as your number one overall player in the class, which, most people I think have him in the mid first round range. So, you could speak a little bit about him, some of the other high school shortstop that you like at the top of the draft. And could you see any of these guys being in play with the Cardinals at that fifth overall spot, aside from the guys that we already talked about?
Yeah, so I think Gavin's definitely more of a third baseman. It's about a 6'8", 60-yard dash time. So not amazing. 70 arm, great lateral mover. Good instincts, hands are good. I think he plays, above average third base. He's got a present plus power in game, which is really good. It's a 112 mile per hour max EV, 106 90th. The contact rates were great. About 18% whiff, perform versus velocity, hits velocity up, plus bat speed, quick trigger. Bat path is kind of very succinct. Does damage to his pull side in the air. I think it was about a 35% air pull on the circuit, which is not bad. So it's a very, very well-rounded bat. Very explosive jumper. So kind of, some grounds to think the force production kind of comes into play as he, physically matures. So I think there's a lot to like with him offensively, but I don't think he's a shortstop. Two guys who probably are shortstops, though, are Daniel Pierce and Steele Hall. Both of them are really, really great athletes. Both of them are, plus or better runners. Both of them have the arm talent, the hands, actions, everything you want from a shortstop. Steele's an 80 grade athlete. He really is. Great testing data. Plays the position. He's young. He's a reclass from 2026. The EVs are pretty good on him, age adjusted. I think he'll probably end up being around above average in game power. There's definitely a 110 EV in there somewhere. The bat path's good. I like it. It's quick trigger. Kind of an opposite field a little bit look with him, more so than kind of most of the other guys in the class. Issue with breaking balls. But again, he was really young on the circuit last year. I think he was 16 for part of it. So that kind of has to factor in. Small sample also, right? I think the sample for him against breaking balls was like 70 pitches. So that's not, you can kind of inform your thinking, but I don't think you can kind of formulate an opinion, like a full opinion off of that. Daniel Pierce, saw him a lot this year, kind of Georgia kid. A ton of power, plus power, 70 runner, plays shortstop, great actions, coach's kid, smart, everything like that. Good body. I think he'll be really good as well. Kind of some variance in the launch a little bit with him, but I mean he's still a high schooler. Can't nitpick that to death, right? And then kind of one other guy I'll touch on briefly is Josh Hammond, who I absolutely love. He's a great athlete, great on the mound too. I was standing next to him at USA Baseball, and it's like he's a strong kid, man. I'll tell you that. I mean, if you saw him walk out on the field pregame at UGA is my college football team. If you saw him walk out on the field there, you'd be like, oh yeah, that guy plays running back, right? A great athlete again, has the arm talent, a lot of bat speed. There's some bat to ball, but also it's a free swinging approach, right? So there's going to be some whiff there. A lot of Josh Donaldson kind of connections for me there. Kind of name and then way of doing things, power, everything like that.
It seems like this high school class has a chance to be something really special, down
Definitely.
the road. So like any of those guys that you mentioned, do you think they could be in play for, potentially an underslot deal at 5, or do you think the Cardinals just run the course and pick a guy that is probably going to go for around slot money at that pick?
I think JoJo would definitely make sense there. Maybe Steele Hall as well, though I think both of those guys fit kind of more in the 7 to 12 range. I think for anybody else, as much as I love Gavin, I don't think he was down this spring, which is something I don't personally punish kids for, but I think it's a valid kind of concern. So I don't think he probably fits in that top 10, top 5 range. But I think those two, Steele and JoJo, would kind of definitely make sense. Billy as well.
Jumping into round 2 to 3, the Cardinals have 3 selections. Past few years, the Cardinals haven't had a second round pick, whether it be, due to the fact that they signed Sonny Gray or Wilson Contreras. But they have a second round pick. They have a competitive balance round B pick as well. So they'll be making 4 selections on day 1. I just wanted to hear about some of your favorite draft prospects that are projected to go, in the 2nd to 3rd round range, and some players you think could be, good fits for the Cardinals organization. I don't think they're going to have a ton of money to be able to go super underslot unless they surprise us with with their first overall selection. But who are some names that you think could be viable, in that 2nd to 3rd round range, and some of your top players, some of your favorite players in that, 2nd to 3rd round range, I would say?
Yeah, 2 guys I really like are Brock Sell and Jordan Yost. Those are both really high bat to ball guys, high schoolers, both of them. Kind of thin bodies, great athletes, make a lot of contact, play premium positions. But I think the drawback with both of those guys is they'll probably be very, very tough signs, very expensive. I would be shocked if Brock ends up signing. I would be less shocked if Jordan ends up signing, but I mean, his brother's a player at University of Florida. I think parents are involved kind of with the Florida athletics program. So I would be very shocked to kind of see both of those guys go. I think one of them, maybe both of them, I'd have a hard time foreseeing that. But guys like Michael Lombardi at Tulane, Spencer Strider parallels for some people. High carry fastball, throws hard, great athlete. There's a lot of dialing in to do with him, but the traits are really good. He'd be actually new to only pitching in pro ball. He hit this year. I think he had like a sub 10% whiff rate. Not much power though. So I mean, he's got some talent with the bat, right? Maybe a guy like Cody Bowker, really low launch, high stuff from Vanderbilt. Transferred from Georgetown up to 96. I think it's a 4.8 release height actually, which is, I mean, very interesting. I like him a lot. I think he'll start. Then you have a guy like Dominic Reed, who's ultra high extension, 7'1", up to 96. Has a really, really interesting kind of change up shape. It's like it's +1, but he'll get it down to like -2 vertical with like 15 inches of fade in the mid 80s, which is really interesting. A lot of strikes with him. Doesn't walk a lot of guys. And then kind of Cade Crosland is one who I come back to as being a really interesting guy. I think the changeup has an argument to be kind of in that 70-80 range. Obviously with him, he really, really struggled to kind of throw strikes consistently and kind of stay off barrels. But I think he kind of tones down that fastball shape, maybe kind of points it out to just kind of, trying to let the stuff play. He throws hard up to 98 from the left side, has that kind of same high efficiency shape as Alejandro Rosario, which is kind of the guy who I go back to, not necessarily as being like a comp for him, but just being kind of some parallels, right? With that kind of fastball shape, kind of high fastball usage. The results weren't great, but the traits were. Secondary shapes are really good. So he's one who I really like.
I love that you mentioned Michael Lombardi. He's a guy that he's one of my favorite pitchers in the whole class, to be honest. Fastball 93 up to 97 with 22 vert from 5.9 release. As you mentioned, great athlete, two-way player in college. Won't be a two-way in pro ball, but you could clearly see the athleticism when you just watch him pitch. He's a good mover on the mound, and he's got a feel for pretty good curveball. I think that once he gets over to pro ball, we'll start to see him spin some sort of slider, I would assume, and change up to pair for the Arsenal to play. But I think he's a great mold. I think this is someone that we'll probably get a chance to start in pro ball. I just think there's just too many fun traits in there, and if he doesn't end up working as a starter, I still think you're looking at someone that has the potential to be a back end reliever arm. So absolutely love that you mentioned Michael Lombardi. There are a couple other names, high school players, that I wanted to touch on: Jaden Foskey and Landon Harmon. Do you get the sense that both of those guys are going to go for like first round or comp A money? Because if so, I don't see them in play with any of the Cardinals picks. But if they go for more, let's say, second round money or a little bit higher, I guess maybe there's a chance. But I think it's going to come down to money for sure.
Yeah, what I always say with prep arms is you never know, right? You see guys like Brock Porter, who's projected as like a top 10 pick, get all the way down to the third round, and you see a guy like Frank Mazzucato, who's projected, kind of in that later kind of area of day one, jump up to number 7. So it's really hard to say with a guy like Landon. It's a really extreme cut ride shape with kind of above average extension, 5.7 release. He's been up to 100 this spring, has a gyro shape in the upper 80s, has a sweeper in the low 80s. Really interesting change-up shape, a lot of fade on it, gets whiffs on everything, has average or better zone rates, strikes the ball at about 68%. So there's a lot of interesting things that he does. Obviously, you're 6'5", 195, who moving like that. There's some intrigue there just on its own. But I think he's a guy who could be, maybe a seam shift candidate, just kind of with that cut ride profile. Maybe you kind of shift the axis a little bit, and it's more like a Corbin Burns style cutter fastball, which would be really interesting for him, I think. Obviously, with those Mississippi kids, you always, think there's maybe a little bit extra you can do, kind of with underdeveloped country boy kind of deal. High athlete. I think there's some cleaning up with the arm action, right? It's a little bit loose kind of in the back, outside of 90 degrees at front foot. So some stuff you can kind of do there. Some people think he'll blow out. Because he throws 100 and isn't exactly, moving with a pro delivery just yet. But he's a young kid still figuring out the body. I think even if you do think he blows out, I think the stuff is just so interesting. To me, the traits are so good. And also, like, this is some separate conversation for another day. But the success rate for pitchers returning from Tommy John is about 80%. And you can also overcome kind of a lot of naturally ingrained, movement, motor preferences, movement biases. So there's a lot of reteaching you can do after, a blowout, quote unquote, which, that doesn't really concern me. You look at the Dodgers, right? Jumping back to Jaden, swing is geared to loft, can get the ball pull side in the air kind of at will, right? Similarly to a kind of a Bryce Eldridge type of player. I think the power is going to play up. The EVs are really, really strong. He's a strong kid. Good athlete, not the best runner, but he'll have a shot to play really good right or left field. I think right probably caught on the circuit. Arm is good. So he'll have the arm to kind of play there, make that work. Contact rates are just off the charts. I think it was upwards of 90% end zone contact. There's some chase to his game, but there's chase to a lot of the high school guys, game. They don't see many strikes on the circuit. I think the circuit average was like 50%. So, you're gonna get some chase, but I think he's a really, really talented player, very well-rounded offense, a lot of power. Hard hit rate was over 30% on the circuit. So that's kind of top end, right? It's up there with guys like Quentin Young, Ethan Holliday, Alec Blair, Mason Legenza, like all those guys. So he's up there, best hit tool of the bunch. So he's one I really like. I think he'll probably fit maybe as high as the Rays in the first round, probably closer to the comp. But I think he's a guy who's kind of going to be really good moving forward. So that's a good name you bring up. I love both of those guys.
Would you say the hit power combination among high school players is the best? You think Gavin Feen might be better, or would you say Foskey is right up there with him?
I think Gavin Feen is definitely a tick ahead of him. I think Foskey is definitely in that mix, though. And I think if you wanted to say that it'll maybe play a little bit better just off the swing plane, the attack angles, you could make that argument. But I do think Feen is a little bit ahead of him just in terms of has more power. The launch profile is a little bit more consistent with Gavin. So that would kind of be my take there.
Yeah. One last name I wanted to mention, college player, Cade Obermueller, left-hand pitcher, Iowa. When we're talking about an Obermueller, it is a dead zone fastball, but he's getting it from a 4.8 release. So really low release height, wide release, 3 feet, rel X as well. So, in a lot of ways, he feels like the budget Jamie Arnold in this class. I think there's a lot of similarities there. The sweeper isn't as hard of a pitch, but it gets more horizontal, better spin rates. I think he's up to like 2,800 RPMs on average. So with a Cade Obermueller, we're looking at a guy, low slot lefty that has plus spin traits, a fastball that should work well enough just due to the approach angle. Sweeper, I think, is plus, potentially plus. And he's still working on finding a third, fourth pitch. But I think at pro ball, much like we talked about with Arnold, I think that he's going to add a cutter. I think that he'll at least try to add some sort of change up. So I think he's another guy that I'd like to throw around, and just curious about your thoughts on him. Do you think he's going to go in the second round? Could he be someone that falls to the Cardinals pick?
Yeah, I think he goes probably about 10 to 15 picks after wherever um, Zach Root were to go. So if you think Zach Root's, going at pick 30, let's say, I think he probably fits around pick 45 in that hypothetical. I think the Jamie Arnold thing, discount Jamie Arnold, right? That's valid. That's actually what I have written in his report. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Definitely needs a little bit of a changeup shape, cutter shape, definitely. The command. I think this is the first year it's kind of taken a real jump for him. So that's kind of something that I'm always wary of, right? 1 year command sample sizes. So that's definitely something to consider. But I mean, I'm really high on the player. I think I have him kind of in that second round area. And then kind of sticking for one more guy, if you want like our deep value, kind of Jamie Arnold, Cade Obermueller type, you look at there's a kid at Auburn, Cade Fisher, who's kind of similar release, lower on velo, and then you kind of look at, I think it's Caleb Keys or Caden Keys, Caden Lees, something like that, from University of Maine. Kind of similar, kind of low launch, high extension lefty. But I mean, his thing is, not as much command. So there's 4 guys who kind of fit into that mold a little bit, with kind of Jamie being the top. Then you have Cade, and then kind of you go down a little bit into the Moneyball kind of example, where then you have your kind of Cade and Caden.
Yeah, so I mean, this goes right into our next question, which is about the day two. The day two, some interesting day 2 players, and the Cardinals have drafted a ton of players that have those low launch fastballs recently. Just dating back to last year, you look at a Brian Holliday, a Braden Davis, a Nolan Sparks, guys that have lower launches and still gets solid carry on their fastballs. So I think that'll be something to watch this year. And on the hitter side, I think they tend to focus on guys with advanced bat to ball skills. Think of Ryan Campos, Ian Petrutz, John Gazdar from last year. So are there any interesting day 2 picks? I know you went over some of them already, but who stand out to have who have similar profiles to the ones that the Cardinals tend to target, and guys that you could see the Cardinals picking in day 2 of the draft?
Yeah, I think one that comes to mind is Ryan Daniels, who's the second baseman at UConn. Kind of bat to ball skills, has kind of all of the things you want to check off from the exit velocity standpoint. So kind of a stable hit tool power kind of guy. And then you have Jake Cook, who's kind of a combine riser actually. The contact rates are really, really high with him. Doesn't whiff much. Run times are really good. I think he'll be interesting. Kind of that bat to ball skill type of guy. Really light on power, but also like that's kind of speed defense hit tool driven. And then kind of getting into a guy with some carry on his fastball is Brady Afton, sticking at UConn. 18, 19 inches a ride, sits about 94 up to 97. I've got him with 3 average or better secondaries. I believe it's cutter, slider, changeup. I really, really love how the changeup plays off of his fastball. I think it's probably a plus pitch for me. Draws a ton of whiff, about 45%. So that's one who I'd keep my eye on. Maybe a guy like Mason Peters, who's a left-handed pitcher. He's somebody who I really like. I think he could foreseeably maybe be a starter, probably more of a reliever. But I mean, it's a lot of a few good arm side shapes, kind of cut ride shape to the fastball. If you want to start him, probably give him a sinker. I think that would be kind of foreseeable right there. But he's one who I'd kind of be high on, and then kind of touching quickly maybe on a Ben Bybee from Arkansas. He's one who I really like kind of as a dev piece probably. So those are kind of some names who jump to mind.
Yeah, the only guy out of that list that I'm aware of, before this conversation, Jake, or what is it? Cook, Jake Cook.
Yep. Jake Cook from Southern Miss.
Yeah. So like you said, not a ton of impact in there, but he's an 80 grade runner. I think he had the fastest time in the MLB draft
He
combine.
did.
Smooth left-handed swing, not like I said, not a ton of impact, but I think he does have the frame to potentially add a little bit more juice. It's never going to be anything crazy. I don't imagine, but at least passable in pro ball, I would say. So great that you mentioned him. But
Yep.
overall, thanks for hopping on with me, Azad. This was fun to do.
Oh yeah, I appreciate it.
And like I'd love to have you back on if we can. I know that with the draft season, it's going to be a busy time for you, but hopefully after the draft, we can go over some of the top Cardinals picks, and
Definitely.
really interested to hear some of your thoughts on those selections.
Oh yeah, always happy to kind of dig through some draft guys. I think it'll be good to kind of get towards draft season, right? It's just around the corner. I can feel it. I'm excited for two things over the next weeks. It's the college football game coming out on next Tuesday, and then I got the draft next Sunday. So I'm amped up.
Let's go. Well,
oh yeah.
Thank you everyone for catching this episode of Birds on the Farm, my solo hosting debut. Hopefully we can get Sandy back. He's on his honeymoon currently, and Josh couldn't make it today, but it was a blast to be on with Azad. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and really looking forward to the draft just coming up in a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me on.